Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and I am so happy that you are here. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone out there to say thank you for all the positive feedback that we've been getting on our new Monday drop tip of the week. So if this is your first time tuning in, we have been for years releasing all of our episodes on Thursdays. And they've been our long form episodes like the one you're about to hear with amazing guests. But we realize that not everybody has a full 45 minutes. And sometimes we just need a little extra boost and inspiration. And so we recently, last month, started dropping these additional bonus episodes on Mondays, and we're calling them Tip of the Week. They're short, like 10-minute episodes with just one little nugget of inspiration for you, something to think about, something that you can practically implement in your life. And you guys are loving it. We're getting such great response. So thank you so much. Make sure that you click the subscribe button, share it with a friend, all the things. It really just helps get our show out in front of other people. And so we really, really appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode. So like I said, love to bring on guests of all different walks of life from all different, industries and have all different perspectives. And I have an amazing guest that I can't wait to learn from today. I'm actually going to read you a little bit about her. I don't normally read bios, but this bio is pretty impressive. So I'm going to read it. So joining me today is Tina Wells. So when I'm about to rattle off Tina's accomplishments, you're going to be like, really? She's been in Essence's 40 Under 40. She's the author of over 20 books. She's the academic director for Wharton's Leadership in the Business World program at University of Pennsylvania, which is not that far from me. She's the founder of Buzz Marketing Group, an agency that she founded at, wait for it, age 16 with clients like Dell, Oprah Winfrey Network, Kroger, Apple, P&G, J&J, and American Eagle. But I invited her on the show to talk about her new book, which is called The Elevation Approach. And what I love about this book is that it talks about how she integrates personal and professional ambitions, values, and responsibilities through this 4-phase plan. And we're going to talk about that. The 4-phase plan is preparation, inspiration, recreation, and transformation. We're going to dig into all the things. But again, Tina is just walks the walk, talks the talk. And I said, we just got to have you on the show. So without further ado, let me welcome Tina Wells to the show. Welcome, Tina.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm a little exhausted after hearing my own bio. But...
Isn't it you know what? It's well-deserved. Like, you really have an impressive resume right there. And I'm sure I didn't even I just gave the highlight reel. So kudos to you. I'm just going to ask before on a personal note, are you in the Philadelphia area?
I am. When I heard you say you're close to Penn, I'm in South Jersey. So I was like,
I'm Bucks County girl. Bucks County girl. So
you are in the best place. If I lived in PA, I would be a Bucks County girl.
Oh my gosh. Well, I live in New Hope, so you'll have to come and visit me, and we'll go out we'll go out for dinner and drinks or whatever you want. Whatever. So yes, that's so funny. Small world. Yes, we're neighbors.
Small world, and you're in the cool place. So
well, I don't know about that. Well, anyway, all right. So I gave kind of the official highlight reel of all the things, or at least a lot of the big things. But in your own words, just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and, kind of what you do.
Yeah, I always love to say I'm an accidental entrepreneur. When I was growing up, my dream was really to be a fashion writer. I thought I was going to have to do something at the time that felt more practical, like become an attorney. And I would still going to be thrilled to do that. But my passion was really fashion and pop culture. And, I love to say right now I'm in a full circle moment when, my passion it really is, still pop culture product. And I, get to design product that I love now. And so it's very interesting to have this full circle moment.
We didn't even talk about the fact that you have a new line at Target. We didn't, I saw that because it wasn't on your official bio, but or maybe it was, and I like just extracted it. But I looked at it, and I'm not a product pusher, people. Like, this because I'm all about like simplifying and whatever. But you've got you have a product line at Target. That's pretty impressive. And you're like the first, like you're part of their like Black women owned initiative. I don't know the exact terminology, so forgive me for my ignorance, but like kudos to you for paving the way for so many people.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just one of those full circle moments. And, I started. And so one of the things I want to say to your listeners are those things that you loved as a teenager, like don't dismiss them because you never know where, they can take you. And, I started out interested in fashion, answered an ad in the back of 17 magazine, led me to a career in marketing for over 20 years. I still love marketing and everything I learned as a marketer. And, really the book tells the story of my burnout, my first burnout at 27, and then really a 12-year journey to figure out this whole work-life harmony thing, right? And I knew pretty early on that balance wasn't going to be attainable for me. I'm just someone who loved my work. And I think a lot of times when we talk about this concept of either I say work-life harmony, but work-life balance, we sometimes forget that there are people probably like you and like me and like many of your listeners who absolutely love the work that we're doing, right? And our need for harmony comes from really taking a break from something we're actually in love with, right? And so
100%.
that is really hard to do. I think a lot of times we think about, well, you have a 9 to 5 and you're not happy and you want to carve out family time. What do you do when you actually love your business? You would want to do it 24/7 and it's just not good for you, And so that was really where I was. And, it was a long journey I talk about in the book to get to these 4 phases and to really get to the place of feeling harmony, and I realized pretty early on that the idea of balance wasn't going to work because balance means that if you add more work, you have to add more play and more life. And then you just keep stacking things and you're not really getting the end result for either. Where harmony basically says you take a plate, you make your favorite meal, all the ingredients that work, and that's the thing that works for you. And so, the book is really just an invitation to figure out what work-life harmony means for you. I love that I'm looking at a sign right now in your office that says Clutter Clinic.
Yes. That's my speaker series that I do.
Because the very first principle of the elevation approach is about decluttering your space. And we take you through an exercise that's not just physical, right? It's decluttering mental, emotional, calendar clutter, digital clutter.
Wait, that's my thing. Like, that's all. All right, go ahead. Keep talking.
Anyone who runs the Clutter Clinic, though, I would assume, who has your listening group, I would assume that that's what you're about. But yeah, that is really what started it all for me. And so I think for any of your listeners who are thinking about how to get to work-life harmony, it's really important that decluttering your space was the very first principle we introduced in the book, because I'm sure you know this, I'm sure you talk about this and teach this. It's an invitation, right? When you're literally, physically, emotionally, mentally, digitally making space, it's an invitation for the things you want to come. And that was really the biggest thing I had to do. As you talk about all my career accolades, it's like I talk in the book about quitting Wharton and what that journey was like and quitting a lot of things. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was really just like clearing emotional space, clearing space to really call in the career I have now that I absolutely love, but it really took that kind of total detox over my first sabbatical, 3 years ago that really allowed for me to really create space to do all the things I'm doing now.
I love it. And you bring up some really, really good points that I want to just kind of go back and hit on, because again, I say this all the time, like I am so blessed that I get to do a job that I love. Like I get to work with people one-on-one. I get to coach and mentor people that are building their own professional organizing businesses and help them take their own passion and turn it into a profession. I get to podcast and talk to like amazing, talented, people like yourself. And these are all great things, but they all take time, right? This is all a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. And for a lot of people, when you are doing things that you love, or all of these, even if you're like, hey, I wanted to have kids and I have a bunch of kids now, right? When you're finally are getting the things, whatever, or that are meaningful to you, it really is hard to say no. And we talk a lot here about calendar clutter. We actually, my main 3 core principles are physical clutter, emotional clutter, calendar clutter. Then we talk about digital clutter, financial clutter, the mental load clutter. So we have all of these that we talk about, because again, it's not just, and the physical stuff, it's not just the physical. The physical stuff often is a byproduct of all of the other things. And so it's hard for people to say no for a variety of reasons. It's hard for people to say no because they're pleasers. It's hard for people to say no because I feel guilty. Like you're saying, you're achieving all the success, and it's like, oh, wait, Oprah wants to work with me. I can't say no to that. Like, hello, I would be insane. So-and-so wants to work with me, or I have this opportunity to do this. A lot of times we really struggle. And my nuanced word is integration, right? I say work like an integration, but it's all essentially under the same umbrella of how do you find that, again, that healthy relationship with having enough space to do the things that are important to you, and also the productive things that are moving the needle.
Yep. And I mean, and you hit on it, right? It's the space. And a lot of times we think we want to change our life, or we really want to, but we're not actually clearing out the space to bring in the change that we're looking for.
Yeah, because you have to make time to do it. If there's certain things that I always tell people, you're going to either outsource it, like, and have somebody else do it for you. You're just going to say, I'm going to pay somebody to declutter. I'm going to pay somebody to do my yard work. I'm going to pay somebody to do the laundry, make my meals, or whatever. Or it's just I'm just going to be a frazzled mess, and I'm going to be depleting, or I'm going to carve out that time to meal prep, do the laundry, put it away, do the yard work, whatever that looks like. And how do you fit that in? So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your burnout. I know we want to encourage people to go and read the book, so I don't want you to give all the things, but just like, I think that's an important part, because there are a lot of people that are listening out here that are experiencing burnout. And I just think it would be helpful to kind of hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah. And I think for me, like my burnout came at what many would consider to be a height of my career, right? So by 27, I had been running my business for 11 years. And a few years before that, I had a cover story with O Magazine. And that was such a game changer, having that stamp of approval. And I really just felt so grateful for all the opportunities. I'd moved my office to New York City a couple of years before. And I was really in what I considered to be my prime. And it's the first time I started to realize, the grinding, drinking Starbucks until 3:00, not really sleeping, working in the city 4 days a week, going nonstop. Like at some point that started to catch up with me. And I had a friend who said, come with me on a vacation to Miami. We're just going to have fun, lay by the pool. And I feel so embarrassed to say this now, but I'm like, what do you do at the pool? And she's like, what do you mean? You just lay there. I'm like, and do what? I had no experience at that time, and I grew up in Southern New Jersey. I'm the oldest of 6. We always had family vacation. We always had beach vacation. So it's not like I didn't experience play and fun. It's just, from teenagers through college, I'd really gone into this work zone. And so, having that vacation and seeing, oh, this is great. Did help me realize like there's another way, but I still struggled for the next 12 years because I then started using vacation and workouts and other things to like manage stress, and it just wasn't working, and so that's what really led me to this 4-phase approach. And what I realized is, recreation was what was missing. I was constantly in preparation and inspiration. I think a lot of your listeners can relate to, you do the work, you get super fired up about an idea, and then you just go back and do more work and get super fired up. And you're in this weird loop of nothing really coming to fruition. You're putting out a lot of energy. You're talking to a lot of people. You're doing the things, but yet it's not coming together. And what I realized for myself was that recreation was missing. And recreation can take a lot of forms. Recreation is not exercise. I talk about that in the book. Exercise for me goes in preparation, right? It's what gets my mind right for the day. Recreation is, taking a walk, a dinner with friends, doing something for yourself. I think we talk a lot about self-care. Even
Mhm.
that almost, the way we use it to kind of bandage burnout isn't as effective as it could be the way I'm describing it in the book. And so, my biggest piece of advice to anyone who feels like they're in burnout and you want to really get to the next level is watch children and watch how they play. And that's
Mhm.
really the approach to recreation I'm asking you to consider, which is, curious, fun, uninhibited, with no real end goal in mind, right? A child doesn't say, I'm playing so that I can go be better at school tomorrow, right? It's just like,
Right. There's no agenda.
woo-hoo,
There's not necessarily like the agenda, but it's,
agenda, right? They're just
yeah.
playing because it's fun. And so that's really my personal burnout story is figuring out how do I do the work that I love? How do I carve out time for my friends and my family and the busy lives that we're all leading and feel really good when I'm getting to my goals? I don't want to get to my goal or get to the thing I'm trying to achieve and just be sick and tired and angry and frustrated when I reach that.
I love that. First of all, thank you for walking us through that. And the other thing that I was thinking just as you were talking is, and I see this with a lot of people, just whether it's with clients or just even my friends in real life is, you're just going nonstop. Again, this means you could work inside the home, outside the home. It doesn't really matter, but you're just on the go all the time. And then you have a vacation that's planned, right? Like actually at the time that we're recording this, it's our school's spring break, right? So a lot of people are away, but you're on the go nonstop, 24/7, basically. Then you stop, go on this vacation, which is like your time out, and you're wherever you are, relaxing. Maybe you are taking a few days of this like R&R, but then you come back. And as soon as you come back, you're right back where you started. So it's a temporary fix as opposed to trying to carve it into weaving it into your life as part of this. Like, we want to live a healthier lifestyle because all you're doing is hitting the pause button. And then you have to also play catch up because everything else is still on, like, going, and you just took yourself out of the equation for 5 to 7 days.
Yep. It's so true. And it's funny, I almost caught myself, this is a lifelong practice for me. But, I was planning my niece's spring break. We're leaving on a trip tomorrow. And she says, I'm like, okay, we're going to do the thing we always do, right? We're going to go to Europe, do this, go see this, go do that. And she's like, Aunt Tina, I just want to go to the pool and I just want to go to the beach. And I'm like, thank you for reminding me that, just because it's spring break, we don't have to hustle through a trip and see all the things and we can just go and do nothing, and again, these are practices I need and I've created a system I need because I need to work my tools, right? And when I feel out of harmony, the first thing I do is I look at these 12 principles of instant elevation to see what's going on. Do I need to declutter my space? Um, do I need to get curious? What about my numbers, right? I can kind of rattle through a list. Am I keeping up with my rituals? And, that idea, I'm like, okay, I was about to turn what should be my recreation into what? Inspiration for a book or a whole thing, right? I was about to turn this trip into something it wasn't meant to be. And so grateful to her for reminding me that, no, we're going to go play for a little bit because I got to get back to school when I come back. And I appreciate it, and it's a very different type of spring trip for us, but it's exactly
Yeah.
what in the season.
And I do a lot of work about looking at different personality typologies and how people's personalities and the lens in which they see the world, how that influences their relationship with stuff. So it's like geeky clutter stuff. And so I know for me, as somebody who is a very forward thinking person, I'm all about planning, right? I'm a planner. And then when I finally get to whatever the thing is, whether it's an event or a trip or whatever it is, I'm like, okay, now on to like, where's the next thing? I'm ready. And it's like, I can't and my husband used to say about house projects, we've lived in our house for like 20 years, which is amazing. When I like think about, I'm like, what? We haven't been here 20 years, but we have. And every year it was like, we're doing a new project. And he's like, when are we finally going to be done? And I'm like, what? What do you mean when we're finally be done? Like, there's always something and you're always going. And that's just the mode that my brain intuitively works. And I have to be super intentional about stopping to pause and rest, because again, whether that's societal, whether that's environmental, whatever that is, or intuitive, I just have this feeling like, what? I can't just like sit and read a book. That would be lazy. That would be, what are you talking about? So it's like the kind of the same thing with you. Like, wait, you're just sitting by the pool. And I think we have these false narratives that a lot of women specifically tell ourselves. And I love that you're shining a light on that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think it's just, I'm asking you to look at all the things we all have to do in a different way, in a different light, ask yourself different questions to really get to the heart of what you really want. And again, what work-life harmony really looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be personal, right? It's going to be personal depending on who you are, what it is that you're trying to achieve, what season of life you're in. If you're a mom with little kids and what your goals and what you need might be very different than somebody else that is in the process of, I don't know, like myself, who's an empty nester and I'm on a different journey, or somebody that is just starting their career. I think, again, it's going to look different depending on who you are and kind of what your goals are.
Totally. And also there are seasons where we are just busy, right? Like there are some things that are inevitable, right? If you have listeners who have back to school, like back to school is not when you're taking a long break for recreation, right? Like
Right.
you got some things, or if you're working on, your PhD, there's a time when you are like really pedal to the metal, right? What I'm asking you to do is think about those times and say, okay, I can't go on vacation when my kids go back to school, but that's the time to keep up with my rituals, right? So if I have a morning coffee or morning hot beverage ritual, whatever it is, got to do it. If I've got a ritual around, I want to take a bath. I have a friend who just said she started this dry brushing and then self-tanning ritual, but it's like, you got to keep that thing, right? And she's like, I dry brush and then 24 hours later, I got to do the self-tan, but I'm like, whatever it is, even if in those really busy seasons, you are giving yourself 5 minutes a day to say, I'm going to think about me, because you're being intentional, it's going to fuel you getting through that really tough season.
Well, that's it. And you hit the nail right in the head. It's that intentionality. It's doing the little things. It's those little things that you do recurring that will then eventually add up. And the more you work that muscle and continue, like you said, I love it because I use the word all the time. It's practice. It's the continual practice of I'm doing this. And it could be, I'm putting my phone, like come 9:00, my phone goes on do not disturb or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just making up whatever time, but I'm just saying, like, if I know that if it's around me, I'm going to just pick it up. So I just don't put it around me, or I'm going to intentionally say, you know what? I'm going to stop answering email after 8:00 because I can. And again, this is all going to be dependent on your life and how it works for you, but just setting those parameters and sticking to it. And I think also, I don't know if you find this, people tend to be black and white. Like they think if they do it, it has to be the way. Like you could try it and be like, yeah, that didn't really work. Let me try something else.
Absolutely. And the book is an invitation to really get to know yourself again. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I also say that about goals and dreams. Like just because it was your dream 10 years ago does not mean that you have to like stick with it. You can decide you want something new or something different. You can decide that rituals that work for you in one season don't serve you in the next. All of those things can change. For me, my preparation season in the winter, being an East Coast girl, looks very different than my spring and summer, right? So even when I am in preparation or doing different workouts, now that it's nice weather, I tend to want to do everything outside, right?
Yes.
So my numbers, my weight, everything looks very different because I'm out and about and moving and walking and doing different things than I do in the winter, where I like to be warm and I'm doing hot yoga and doing reformer. And so it's okay to like change those things. I personally, I change my skincare every season because my skin needs different things. And so we're making all of those changes, our diets, everything, why would we say that the same goal we set for ourselves in one season is exactly what we want to do in the next? You have to give yourself permission to evolve and permission to just change and want different things.
Well, and I love that. And you can so tie that right in with your physical stuff, because I see this with people when it comes to physical clutter that shows up in their lives, where they accumulated something because it was important to them, and I've seen it with kids, right? Like kids have a hobby or a sport that they're into. So you accumulate all of this stuff and then they outgrow it or they're not into it anymore. And it could go for adult hobbies or kids. But for whatever reason, you feel like I've invested in this, or maybe I'll come back to it, and you hold on to things that maybe it's just time to let those things go. And you could look at that in terms of, your time and the way that you're spending it and the physical things and where you're giving your attention, the people that you're leaning into, the relationships. I mean, again, I talk a lot about that as well. Like relationships that serve you well in one season might be time sucking in another phase of your life.
Absolutely. And I actually have a relationship ledger in the book that asks you to really look at that. And we have a principle, in the book that says like, you can't make withdrawals where you haven't made deposits. And we literally have a like deposits and withdrawals ledger so that you can take some
love it.
about that, because I agree with you. Like our relationships are the most important thing that, in my opinion, towards achieving work-life harmony. A lot of times if we're out of sync or out of that harmony, it's because a relationship is off in some point, and there are different types of relationships I invite you to look at, whether it's friend tours over mentors, your personal board of directors, like your Fab Five. And I really dive into the different types of relationships we can all experience, because it's not a one size fits all. And I think the more you understand where everyone fits in your life, the better you are at managing your time, managing your energy, managing expectations, and all of that contributes to work-life harmony.
I love it. I love all about it. What is I'm just thinking again of this, but we were talking before we hit record about kind of like the people who watch and listen to our show. And, we run the spectrum similar to your demographic, primarily women, although shout out to all the men that do listen to our show. But we have a large demographic of women who are just feeling like they're in the weeds with things. And I remember the conversations that I've had with people that are just like, I've got my husband travels, or I'm a single mom, and I like finding that 5 minutes where somebody isn't tugging at my leg or my phone isn't blowing up is really hard. And carving out that time for myself to do those, have that recreation time. Can you give some like real practical, like examples of where maybe somebody can start? Because I think sometimes when you're so in the weeds, you can't even see, like, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah. And my co-writer and I, Stephanie Smith, were really thoughtful, when I started to put together the principles. The first thing is it was important to me that every principle for instant elevation be something that costs you no money, right? If you choose to invest, fine, but I'm telling you to move. I'm not telling you what type of workout, how to move, what it costs. Like movement can and should be free, right? And then the other piece that was really important to me is that everything I was suggesting, you could start with just a 5-minute investment, right? Because we are talking about women who are incredibly busy. When I think about my demographic and the women I'm really writing and speaking to, I like to almost call us like a sandwich generation, because we're sandwiched between taking care of children and aging parents.
Totally. Yep.
And that grab on both sides of, parents who are aging and the emotional toll that's being taken there, right? And raising children, that is, incredibly time consuming. It's work that we love to do on both sides, right? And so you're not upset about either, but it is taking time away. I remember when I was in my marketing days, I was working on a client who had a business in incontinence. completely unrelated. And I read this statistic that really changed the game for me. And it was just a study that was done that said that on average, women in general are doing an extra 30 hours of caregiving per week, sorry. And women of color even more, right? And I thought, okay, we're telling women carve out space for you take 2 hours a day to do your workout, dry brushing, all the things, right, that we want you to do. And
Right.
beyond a full-time job, you are doing 30 additional hours. So even think about those who are working in the home. You are still giving an additional 30 hours of your week to other types of care,
Mhm.
outside of anything you're doing in your home. And so, when we want to say now make time for you, for so many people, if they want to sleep, where is the time coming from? It literally
Right.
doesn't exist in the calendar. You can't make that up. And so that's where I really thought, okay, 5 minutes, what time each day can we all own? And the first thing that came to me was the commute to work, right? If you
Mhm.
are commuting, what can you do? If you're not commuting and you're just spending a few minutes in the morning, I like to put my guilty pleasure. One of my rituals in the morning is my customized news briefing, right? Like my Alexa to talk to me, tell me what's going on while I'm doing all the things. So I'm like making use of that time. I feel really informed. It's part of my preparation phase that starts my morning. But what are those things, and if you can just give yourself 5 minutes, I think the idea of 30 minutes an hour can be incredibly overwhelming to really busy people. I will tell you, for me, my recreation in the afternoon felt a little indulgent at first until I realized it was really helping me bring my work together and was really impacting my work in a very positive way. So some of these things I do think you have to take 5 minutes or just try it out to see if it works for you. Because it's really hard to get to the point of saying, I'm going to just take this hour or take my lunch break later and do this thing instead, if you haven't tried it and you don't see it's working for you.
I think you bring up a really good point that it doesn't have to be a specific rigid time during the day.
No.
So if you know that your mornings are crazy, right?
Mhm.
And because you're commuting, you've got multiple kids going to different school at different times or what. And again, I don't mean to be speaking. There's people that are listening that don't have kids at home, but I'm just thinking about my own life when I was in the crazy seasons of just feeling like I don't have any time.
Yep.
Maybe your time is at 11 in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Maybe your time is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe that's when you have your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we put ourselves in we often draw these like conclusions where there's specific buckets of like, you need to have a morning routine, you have a nighttime routine, but maybe your routine is late morning. You just say, I am going to whatever, go for a walk around the block, or I'm going to do my dry brushing, and that is your time. So I think it's important to, whatever that is, find, just like I talk a lot about your peak productivity time. Like when you are trying to do productive things, like some people are morning people, some people are night owls, like find your peak productivity time. In this case, look at where it can organically, because the last thing you need to do is try to make more work for yourself. Is
Yep.
you want this to not be another thing on your to-do list. Is this should be something that is recharging you, not adding to the depletion.
Absolutely. And I love that idea. That's why I tell everyone, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. You're going to really get to know yourself. And that is part of the journey, is saying, like, when do my rituals fit in? What does decluttering look like? Even down to like, what are the numbers that you want to pay attention to? What numbers do you want to be accountable to? One of my accountability numbers is my sleep score every day. I was the person that would say, I'm getting enough sleep. I'm getting enough sleep. And then I finally started wearing, this little device that tracks my sleep. And at first I was like completely horrified by what I considered enough sleep. And like my body wasn't really reaching readiness. And when I really
Mm.
started to think through that, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to make some changes. But, we all have data that matters to us. It's a very specific experience. And so I love what you're talking about, because that is really what work-life harmony is about. It's about
Yeah.
figuring out what works for you. And only you know that. And only you know what doesn't work for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that your framework, it gives you a framework, but yet it's fluid enough to say, you can adapt this. It's not putting you in this specific bucket or box that you have to subscribe to do these steps this way in order to achieve it. Because again, our goals are different, our lives are different. And what, like you said, what we need, like what defines my level of rest and restoration might be very different than somebody else's.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, also that's why you'll be able to stick with this plan, right? Because you have co-created it for yourself, right? I might be giving you a framework, but then you've taken that framework and actually built out what works for you versus getting something from someone else where you're like, well, this doesn't fit and this doesn't fit. It's like, no, this is a process where you can literally layer in every single thing that will work and fit for you to help you have that work-life harmony.
All right. So on that note, because I could keep talking to you for hours and hours and hours, but on that note, tell our listeners where they can, well, obviously buy the book, but where can they find you, connect up, all the things?
Yeah, so you can find me at tinawells.com. I'm also on Instagram at Tina Wells. I have a weekly newsletter where I share a lot of tips and tricks and blogs, all related to the elevation approach. And of course, you can find Elevation by Tina Wells, which is a home office line of products exclusively at Target. So we're in over 1,500 Target stores. Yeah, and Target.com.
Which is so awesome. Really, I love it. And again, we will link to all things Tina in our show notes. So if you're in the car, on the treadmill, out taking a walk, wherever, don't worry about it. We got you covered. Just go to our podcast page or wherever you're listening to this episode, and we will have all the things Tina related there for you. So we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're just going to put you in the hot seat for our wrap up questions. So sit tight. All right, Tina, this has been great. I know I'm inspired and charged up, and I try to read our guest books before they come on the show, but I haven't read yours, and I absolutely am going to buy it as soon as we're done. So, because I love it, and I love all the things. I love any time that somebody can put together options and solutions for people. So thank you so much for doing this. Speaking of books, so we always ask our guests a few wrap-up questions. The first one has to do with books of inspiration. Obviously, you've put out a book that is inspiring other people, but is there a book that you either continually go back to yourself or that you refer to other people that's had like a big impact or transformative play in your life that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, I guess I would go to two books.
Go for it.
First would be Good to Great. I think it's just a classic. And I think it really, for me, starting out in business, it was just such a good read to understand the difference between a good company and a great company.
Okay.
And I just think personally, I love Marie Forleo's Everything is Figure Outable.
Yeah.
I just think that's something we always need to remind ourselves. And my dad used to always tell me growing up that, like, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so I think the idea of like planning and just knowing that, like, I can get a plan around it, if I can get some thought around it, I can figure it out. And so I think Marie's book is just a great reminder to all of us, like, you're going to figure this out.
Yeah, I love it. So true. And I'm a big Marie Forleo fan. So I think that's awesome. We will put those in, and we have a whole Goodreads list of all of our books. So everyone go check those out. Okay. And then our last two questions that we've asked every guest since the start of our show is, in this particular season of your life, where do you feel the most organized and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess? And I'm going to make you start with the hot mess because I don't like ending on a hot mess moment. So, where do you feel like, you're a little out of whack?
My hot mess. So I believe in, like, when it comes to decluttering, you need to have a landing zone. And like, if you can get that thing cleaned, everything feels clean right now. And so I would say my hot mess is like my island is my landing zone. And I have like a corner of it that feels as clean as I'd like it to be right now. So that is my hot mess. And then where do I think I'm doing well? Calendar clutter. I think
that's great.
My calendar recently and just figuring out, like, carving out the space and time I need and making sure I'm getting those things in there that I need to have and saying no to the things that aren't working right now. And so I think I'm doing well with the calendar.
Awesome. I love it. That's great. Tina, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your wisdom with our community here. If you're new to our show, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. Make sure to click the subscribe, follow button. We've got well over 300 plus episodes on all things about physical clutter, calendar clutter, emotional clutter, digital clutter, anything that you can imagine. And of course, like I said, we have our new Monday's tip of the week. So lots to see, listen, hear, and do at our show. So thank you so much. I'll be back next week for another episode of This Organized Life. Until then, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love and share it with your friends. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at This Organized Life Podcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, you can head on over to our website at simply the letter B like boy organized.com, which is filled with tons of resources, including free downloads, checklists, links to our amazing organizing partners, and all of our digital offerings. I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.